Okay, David here with Independence Live. I'm joined by the architect of the Camp Zeist trial in the Netherlands, which convicted the Mr. Abdel Bassett Al-Megrahi of the Lockerbie bombing. And I'm joined here by Robert Black, QC. So, Robert, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Robert, this is a very it's a big subject in Scotland, as well as in the United States and elsewhere. It's a subject which has brought a great deal of controversy. It's the safety of the conviction of Mr. McGrahi is in some serious doubt and has been from the very beginning, it seems. But we've had a decision recently from the Lord Advocate, which, if you could really just give us an outline of where we are with that decision at the moment.
Yes, the Lord Advocate is, understandably, I suppose, upholding the safety of the conviction and saying basically that McGrahi was convicted after a trial. He launched an appeal, which he lost. The Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission allowed him a second appeal, which Mr. McGrahi then abandoned, understandably, in order to get home, having developed a terminal prostate cancer. But nevertheless, he chose to abandon the second appeal that he had been allowed. That should be an end of the matter as far as Abdel Bassett McGrahi is concerned. And the Lord Advocate's position is that the conviction of Abdel Bassett McGrahi is safe. And as far as the Lockerbie case itself is concerned, all that he is concerned with is finding accomplices of Abdel Bassett McGrahi who could perhaps be brought to trial. So as far as he is concerned, it's still a live investigation with the possibility of other prosecutions of other people who were involved in it. So that is and has been since the day of the conviction. That has been the Crown's stance, the Lord Advocate's stance. But that, it seems to me, is overlooking the fact that there is general public concern about the conviction. And that public concern also led an official government body, the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, to hold that there were 6 specific grounds upon which it could reasonably be argued that Abdel Bassett McGrahi's conviction had amounted to a miscarriage of justice. Now, one of those 6 grounds was that on an absolutely crucial issue about McGrahi's involvement in Malta, no reasonable court could have reached the conclusion that Abdel Bassett McGrahi had been the person in question. Now, that is a very unusual thing for the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission to say about the decision of 3 distinguished and senior Scottish judges, that no reasonable court on the evidence could have reached the conclusion that these 3 judges reached on this absolutely crucial issue, central to McGrahi's guilt. Now, even though McGrahi himself abandoned that appeal, and even though McGrahi himself is now dead, the fact that there are these concerns about this decision, this conviction, raises issues about the criminal justice system and the judicial system of Scotland. And quite irrespective of the personal position of the late Abdel Bassett McGrahi or of his widow and children, the people of Scotland should be concerned that the criminal justice system has been accused of getting this most important case so badly wrong. If it could get this case as badly wrong as it is alleged to have done, are any of us who live under the authority of the Scottish prosecution and the Scottish criminal justice system safe? That is the issue, and that, for me, is the real importance of the Lockerbie case. I mean, I know people, for example, like Jim Swire and other relatives, they regard the conviction of Abdul Basit McGrahi as a logjam impeding their progress towards finding out who really killed their loved ones on board Pan Am Flight 103. Until that conviction is removed from the scene, there is no chance of there being a genuine inquiry into what really caused the Lockerbie tragedy. Now, that is Jim Swire's motivation and the motivation of other UK relatives who are concerned about the conviction of McGrahi. They want to get rid of that conviction as a staging post to a genuine inquiry to find out what really happened at Lockerbie. I myself think that that is an important issue, but a much more important issue for me as a lawyer and as a citizen of Scotland is to find out what went wrong in our investigative system, our prosecution system, and our judicial system that led to the disastrous wrongful conviction of McGrahi. That is something that we've got to investigate and we've got to put right if we as citizens of Scotland, can feel safe and have confidence in the administration of the justice system that governs all of us.
Indeed, indeed. So just to come back to Jim Swire. Jim Swire, of course, lost his daughter in the bombing. He visited McGrahi several times, but he visited McGrahi after the second appeal was dropped. A lot has been made of the fact that McGrahi dropped his second appeal. People say if he was innocent, why did he drop his second appeal? But according, in the words of Jim Swire, quote, he seemed ashamed of dropping his appeal. And there's something not right about the reasons behind McGrahi dropping the second appeal, but he was visited by several people. Who exactly was visiting him, and what exactly was being discussed? Can you shed any light on that at all? Is it still?
Well, yes. I mean,
area?
I know that. I mean, he was visited by the Scottish Justice Minister then, Kenny MacAskill, and there have been stories that it was indicated that his chances of getting back home, either through prisoner transfer or compassionate release, would be enhanced if the appeal were dropped. Now, that, of course, has always been strenuously denied by the Scottish Justice Department. I don't know whether there's any truth in it or not, or whether Mr. McGrahi believed that was the position, rightly or wrongly, that was being indicated to him. But what I do know is that he was also visited by representatives of his own government, representatives of the then Libyan regime. And they, I think, certainly did encourage him to abandon his appeal in order to enhance his chances of getting back to his home country to die. Now, they were very, very keen that McGrahi should get back home because they were coming up to the 40th anniversary of, the Libyan revolution, which brought Muammar Gaddafi to power. And it would have been and was regarded as a great feather in the cap of the Gaddafi regime, that they managed to get their citizen Abdul Basit back home for the 40th anniversary celebrations. So whether there was any pressure or any nods and winks from the Scottish side that it would be a good idea if the appeal were abandoned. I know that there was pressure on Abdel Basset from his own side, from the Libyan side, to do precisely that.
Okay, well that's quite interesting that the Libyan side were known to be involved there. Well, I'm not going to make any too bold statements, but it's strongly held by many that Libya had nothing to do with the bombing, and if that's the case, then Megrahi and then the other the other man were handed over by the Libyan regime as part of a deal behind the scenes, some sort of diplomatic arrangement. And what seems to be difficult to understand here is that the involvement of Prince Andrew, whose name was mentioned by Mr. Gaddafi himself on the release of Megrahi as a thank you. So, sorry, do you want to go ahead there?
Yes, I mean, certainly, I think it is absolutely plain that the British government, the United Kingdom government, wanted Megrahi to go back home. Because after the Lockerbie case was resolved, with the conviction, in my view, the wrongful conviction of Megrahi, relations between Britain and Libya, a process of normalization was taking place. Now, of course, from the British government's point of view, what was vitally important was Libyan oil, and that British companies and British interests should have a very major say in the development of Libyan oil after Libya, post-Lockerbie, came in from the cold and rejoined, if you like, the community of nations and international commerce. So there is no doubt at all, and I know from meetings that I had with very senior officials of the Libyan government that the Tony Blair government in Britain, was very, very keen that Megrahi should return home, and was indicating to the Libyan government that really was effectively a done deal. And I was the one who had to tell the Libyan officials that the decision on whether Abdel Basset Megrahi would return to Libya, whether under prisoner transfer or by compassionate release, was not a decision for Tony Blair and the United Kingdom government. It was a decision for the devolved Scottish government. And when I brought that to the attention of the Libyans, I mean, they looked at me aghast. But Tony has promised, Tony has told us.
Okay. I just want to take us back to the actual 21st of December 1988. To be honest, I think anybody over the age of 35 in Scotland will remember this, because I think it touched us all quite deeply. It was 11 people out of a community of around about 200 that died, and that's absolutely devastating. So the actual disaster itself, it's not owned by the United States, and it's not owned by Scotland either, but it certainly affected us quite deeply here. Certainly, when I was young, I used to live in the city centre, and aircraft would go right across the sort of north of Glasgow and take the north-south approach into Glasgow Airport, and you'd get that low whine of the engine as the plane descends. And
Yes.
it's always thought, every time I heard that, even though I heard it several times a day, that was a plane that was about to crash. It's just something psychological that was locked in. And it only left me when I left the city centre, and you don't hear it in the same way. But, I mean, like I was saying, it's not owned by the US, this tragedy, but just how quickly was the tragedy owned by US authorities? I'm hearing a lot here about a CIA and also FBI officials who seem to occupy the village of Lockerbie within hours and then subsequently took control of the Scottish police investigation, and further to that were then in control of items of evidence from the ground which were being taken from the scene, removed, and then replaced with labels. And then for me, I find that is extraordinarily irregular. Do you have anything to say about the nature of the police work that was being done?
Yes, certainly there have been lots of reports of Americans being on the scene very quickly, and I can testify to that myself. I come from Lockerbie. I spent that Christmas, 1988, in Lockerbie, and it was the first time in my life that in Scotland I had seen people wearing baseball caps. In 1988, baseball caps were not an item of headgear that people in Scotland wore or saw other people wearing. I, for the first time, saw baseball caps being worn by lots and lots of people in 1988, Americans in Lockerbie, investigating the plane. So, I mean, certainly they were on the scene extremely quickly. There have been complaints from police officers, Scottish police officers, that Americans on the scene were not behaving in the way that would have been expected at a Scottish crime scene. Now, and there have been stories about cases being removed and then returned with their contents having been scrutinized. Whether these stories are true, I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that the investigation was from a very early point regarded as being a joint investigation between the United Kingdom, well, between Scotland, basically the Dumfries and Galloway police, and the Americans, because it was an American plane. The majority of those passengers on the plane who were killed were Americans. So there was a clear United States interest. And the United States authorities were not slow in asserting that interest. And as I say, there is nothing necessarily wrong about that, but certainly this was not, if you like, an investigation that was conducted in accordance with ordinary Scottish rules about dealing with major crimes. From the very beginning, there were international aspects, particularly involving the United States, but not just the United States. I mean, at an early stage, the German authorities were involved. And also at an early stage, the not just police authorities were involved, but also intelligence services of various countries were involved. And once the intelligence community becomes involved in an investigation, then it ceases to be a standard police criminal investigation. It becomes political.
Okay. Well, if we just have a look at the evidence, the device that triggered the bomb, we do know was triggered by a barometric a detonator, which reads the air pressure within the hold, which means that when the aircraft reaches a cruising altitude after approximately 8 minutes, the barometer will then begin the timer on the detonator for the explosive. And it's something which the entire premise is that Mr. McGrahi in Malta puts this device with a barometric trigger on an aircraft in Malta, which then flew to Frankfurt in Germany. where the baggage was then transferred into a different aircraft, which was then flown to London Heathrow Airport, where the baggage was then secondly put into a long-haul aircraft which was going to fly transatlantic. And then on the third flight, the barometric trigger detonated the device. Now, not only does that not make sense in terms of how the barometric trigger would work, it would work on the first flight if it was going to, but secondly, the nature of trying to conduct an act of terrorism like that, it's far too complicated, and it leaves far too many opportunities for customs controls to intercept a bomb, which was inside a Toshiba radio. But there's also just one more point on that.
Yeah, but can I just stop you there? Because I mean, the point of the prosecution version of events is that it was not a barometric timer; it was an electronic timer.
Okay.
So I mean that's the basis upon which McGrahi was convicted, and indeed that was what one of the features that pointed towards Libya was that they found what was allegedly a piece of the circuit board of the electronic timer, and that came, so it was alleged, and so the Zeist court accepted, from a series of digital electronic timers manufactured by a Swiss company and supplied only to Libya. So you see, that was what pointed the finger first at Libya. They found this fragment of a circuit board which came from timers that were supplied only to Libya. Now, you see, that's the basis of the Crown case against McGrahi, and the basis of the case that it was sent, the bomb was sent as unaccompanied baggage from Malta to Frankfurt, then from Frankfurt to London, and at London loaded on to Heathrow. Now, onto Pan Am 103 at Heathrow. Now, Jim Swire has never believed that that was at all plausible, because Pan Am 103 blew up 38 minutes after taking off from Heathrow. Now, that is precisely the time at which it would have blown up had it been one of the barometric timers that you have indicated. It would have taken about 30 minutes to reach the altitude at which the barometric timer started, and then 8 minutes later, boom, between 8 and 10 minutes later, Pan Am 103 blew up 38 minutes after taking off from Heathrow. Jim Swire says it strains credibility to believe that purely by chance a digital electronic timer would have blown up the plane at precisely the time that the plane would have blown up had it been a barometric timer loaded at Heathrow. He says that simply does not make sense. And that leads, to the discovery that the fragment of circuit board which pointed the finger at Libya and which enabled the whole story of an unaccompanied bag from Malta to Frankfurt to Heathrow to be plausible, an electronic timer. That piece of circuit board has now been conclusively established by unimpeachable forensic scientists not to be from one of the timers supplied to the Libyans.
Indeed, yes.
The Crown at the time of the Lockerbie trial knew, but did not pass on to the defense. The Crown knew that the metallurgical composition of the coating on the circuitry of the fragment of circuit board was entirely different from the metallurgical composition of the coating on the Libyan timers. The Crown knew that. They did not pass that information on to the defence, and they withheld it from the court. And the Crown witnesses said, in evidence, on oath, that the fragment of circuit board that was found at Lockerbie was similar in all respects to the Libyan circuit boards. That was quite simply a lie. It was perjury because the Crown knew of the metallurgical difference.
Okay, that's, yeah, like I say, it is actually, it's quite a complicated picture to put together, but thanks for that one. Sorry, it was just something that I picked up on not long before we came on air. That there is a report that the bag that contained the device was seen in the luggage system an hour before the Frankfurt aircraft arrived into London Heathrow. It is, I mean, sorry, how safe is that witness testimony?
Oh, that is absolutely established. I mean, this has been established by a magnificent piece of detective work by Dr. Morag Kerr, who has written actually a book about this called Adequately Explained by Stupidity. It's the most wonderful title for a book, and she absolutely destroys the Crown case. She establishes where every single piece of luggage on the luggage container that contained the bomb suitcase, she has traced every single piece of luggage on that container and has conclusively proven that the case which contained the bomb was already on that luggage container before the feeder flight from Frankfurt actually arrived at Heathrow. The Dr. Kerr's conclusions, which, are absolutely irrefutable. They establish without a shadow of a doubt that the case which contained the bomb started its journey at Heathrow. Yeah. It didn't start in Malta. It was nowhere near Frankfurt. It was put into that luggage container for Pan Am at Heathrow Airport, and it was on that container. There is evidence from baggage handlers to that effect. It was on that luggage container an hour before the Frankfurt plane landed at Heathrow. I mean, this is absolutely stunning stuff. This means that Abdul Basit McGrahi, and what pointed the finger at him was his presence in Malta. He allegedly, the court held, he was identified, the court held, as the person who bought the clothes which surrounded the bomb. He was at Lucca Airport on the morning of the 21st of January 1988, and so in some unexplained fashion was able to get this unaccompanied bag onto an Air Malta flight to Frankfurt, tagged through from Frankfurt to London, and get it on Pan Am 103. All of this is nonsense, and Dr. Kerr has conclusively demonstrated that it's nonsense. That the bag did not start in Malta. The bag started its journey at Heathrow.
And that was where there was a break-in prior to the departure of
There was a break-in the night before. That's right. On the night of the 20th, 21st December, there was a break-in at Heathrow. That information was in the hands of the police. It was included in the homes, the large, the computer that they use for large criminal investigations, the Holmes system. It was in the Holmes system. the evidence of the Heathrow worker who discovered the break-in at the baggage build-up area, which was used for this particular flight, for Pan Am 103. This break-in was discovered. It was reported to the police. A report went to the police investigating Lockerbie. They did next to nothing with it, and they certainly did not hand that information on to the defense. I mean, this case, the Lockerbie case, for me as a lawyer and somebody who's been involved in the criminal justice system in Scotland, is a real eye-opener. I had always believed that the Crown, the prosecution in Scotland, took its obligations of providing to the defense information that might be of assistance to them, that they took those legal obligations seriously. Well, they certainly didn't take them seriously in the Lockerbie case. And indeed, the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission's 6 grounds upon which they held that the conviction of McGrahi might be a miscarriage of justice. 3 of those grounds relate, amongst other things, to the Crown failing in its duty to pass on to the defence potentially exculpatory material that would have helped in the defence of the accused person. Now, this is an absolute disgrace, and this is not simply a question that an injustice was done to Abdul Basit McGrahi. If the prosecution service in Scotland behaves in this way, none of us who are at potential risk of being accused persons in criminal cases are safe. And that, once again, is what motivates me. It's not just about removing the injustice that has been done to Abdul Basit McGrahi. It's about protection of the citizens of Scotland from wrongdoing by the prosecution authorities. And that is one of the major items of importance in the Lockerbie case. And that is why we need to get to the bottom of it.
Indeed, and Cardinal Keith O'Brien it's also said that justice for the victims and redemption for the justice system. That's his motivation for getting some closure on this. I just want to ask about Tony Gochi, who was the shopkeeper, the primary witness who said, "I saw Mr. McGrahi." Oh, I mean, okay, he didn't know which day he'd come into the shop. Was it raining? Did he have an umbrella, etc.? But what we do know for sure is that he took $2 million from the CIA. To give that woeful evidence. Has Tony Gochi been spoken to since?
I honestly don't know. I mean, he disappeared for a while. It was rumored that, with the money he had gone to Australia. I heard some time ago that he was actually back on the island of Malta. But as I say, I have no specific information about that. But you see, the amazing thing about Tony Gochi is that I think he certainly, and particularly his brother, because it wasn't just Tony who got money, for his testimony. Tony's brother Paul also got money. Why did he get money? He wasn't a witness. He got money for providing Tony's backbone. That was what he got money from, the Rewards for Justice, Department of Justice in America fund. He got it for keeping his brother, who was the witness, on the straight and narrow. And you see, Tony Gochi, I think, should never have been accepted by the judges as having identified Abdul Basit McGrahi. Because, I mean, the most he was prepared to say was that McGrahi resembles a lot the person who bought the clothes in my shop. Now, did McGrahi resemble a lot the person who bought the clothes? Well, you simply have to look at Tony Gochi's first statement to the police, describing the person who bought these clothes in his shop. The description was a dark-skinned Arab, over 6 feet tall and over 50 years of age. Well, McGrahi in 1988, when the clothes were alleged to have been bought, was 36 years old. He was no more, and may have been less, than 5 foot 8 inches tall, and he is a light-skinned Arab. So the McGrahi did not in any way fit the description that Tony Gauchi had given. And throughout, when Tony Gauchi was being shown photographs of people who might have been the person who bought the clothes, he kept on saying, these people are too young. The person who bought my clothes was older. He was over 50. But nevertheless, he said in court, and he said in an identification parade, never said, this is the man who bought the clothes. He said, this man resembles a lot the person who bought the clothes. And the judges at Zeist, notwithstanding the discrepancy between Abdul Basit McGrahi and the description that Tony Gauchi had given of the purchaser, the judges held that that was good enough, that that was effectively an identification of McGrahi as the person who bought the clothes. It's an absolute outrage.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question that's come in from one of our viewers. Assuming that the security services know the actual truth, that McGrahi is innocent, then why the lies? So this is the big elephant in the room. What's actually going on? Can we touch on that? Is that?
Gosh, I mean,
I can make
think
suggestions
now,
myself if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, I think.
Okay.
Yes,
sorry, go.
I think a lot of it is simply if we now admit that we got things wrong, that would be, a terrible embarrassment. And we would have to explain, why the investigators were pointed in this direction and why they wanted to go in this direction. Because, for the first year of the investigation, I have seen the minutes of the investigation for the first 18 months. For the first year, there was no question of Libya. There was no question. The investigators were on the verge of announcing officially that they knew who was responsible for Lockerbie. They were on the verge of announcing it, and it wasn't Libya.
Can I just suggest here that it wasn't a case of we got it wrong, so much as it was for political reasons that the entire narrative was changed. Sorry, just to come back to the barometric trigger, that was the device favoured by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a Syrian-based terrorist group funded by Iran. And at the time, the British government's agenda was to appease Iran for the return of hostages, and also to get something from the Libyans in terms of easing off their sanctions and making further agreements to do with cooperation with torture and with oil. Sorry, just stumbling my words there. But what I think most people are thinking is that this was actually just a complete setup, and that probably McGrahi was expected by the Libyans to get off in the end. That this would be some kind of a show trial, but for a time, and then he would get off, and then it wasn't really supposed to go as far as Greenock Prison, unfortunately for the poor man. But this what this brings us to is that then, of course, involves the admission of all those dirty dealings in the deserts for filthy oil money, etc.
No, you see, I think the story about Libyan involvement, I think, was never meant to be the foundation of a court case, because it was never believed that Libya would actually hand over Megrahi and Fahima. And so the story that was told by Britain and by the United States was, look, we know who was responsible for the Lockerbie bombing. It was these two Libyans. Here are their photographs. And here is a summary of the evidence that leads us to the conclusion that they are actually the guilty people. Now, it was never suspected for a minute that the Libyans would actually agree to release these people for a trial. So it was safe enough. All that Britain and America had to do was to put forward a plausible case. They would never actually have to prove it in court, because there never would be a trial. The Libyans would never release these people for trial. And that is one of the reasons why, I personally, can never be forgiven, because I actually, played a role in convincing the Libyans that they should hand over these people for trial, and for convincing Megrahi and Fahima themselves that they should surrender themselves for trial, that they would get a fair trial in Scotland. And that, is something that I deeply regret to this day, because they didn't get a fair trial in Scotland. The odds were stacked against them. And it was, to me, practically unbelievable that this case, which had been cobbled together by Britain and America simply to satisfy public opinion, not to satisfy a court of the guilt of individual people, that this cock and bull story was swallowed hook, line, and sinker by the judges at Zeist. That, to me, is the surprising thing.
We've just got another question come in from another viewer saying, why the silence from the media? And I think what I can recall from personal memory about this is that during the actual trial itself at Camp Zeist, it wasn't thought that Megrahi, it just seemed like there was nothing against Megrahi whatsoever. And when he was actually convicted, it was a real shock. It was like, it didn't seem to add up at all. What do you mean he's guilty? That doesn't make any sense. It seemed like all the way through the trial, the media were following it, that this was the wrong man.
Yes, no, I mean, that's right.
There wasn't a great deal, I'm sorry to keep talking here, but there wasn't a great deal said beyond the media felt obliged to refer to him as the Lockerbie bomber with a the. But it was when he was given the compassionate release that suddenly there was absolutely no doubt that he could be innocent at all, and to suggest such a thing was morally reprehensible. And that was the line that was taken in the media, and that I think is what the point that's being made by the viewer, that the media are a part of this political machine.
Yes, I think there are a few, I mean, honourable exceptions to this. There are a few journalists in Scotland, who really have investigated this case and I think have reported it. But these journalists have said to me, you cannot now interest editors in the story. For them, Lockerbie is past. Forget about it. So that makes things very, very difficult. So, as I say, there are journalists for whom I have enormous respect who have done extremely good work on Lockerbie, but they find it very, very difficult now to get their stories, into the newspapers. Editorially, Lockerbie is of no interest any longer, I'm afraid. So what's keeping Lockerbie alive, are campaigners, the Justice for Megrahi campaign, and also, people like Jim Swire, who is one of the applicants, you know, in a fresh application to the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, along with members of the late Abdul Basit McGrahi's family. Now, you see, that also is something very, very unusual, that the people applying for review of a conviction include not just the family of the convict, but the families of that convict's alleged victims. They are joining together in an application to say this man's conviction must be looked at afresh. Now that, you know, is something pretty outstanding, pretty stunning. And then also, the next thing that's keeping Lockerbie alive is the fact that there is a major police investigation ongoing at the moment into allegations of very serious criminal misconduct in the Lockerbie investigation, the Lockerbie prosecution, and the Lockerbie trial. Allegations of perjury, of attempts to pervert the course of justice, and of breach of duty by people in official capacity. Now, these allegations, 9 of them, very serious allegations against some pretty senior people in the Scottish police, the Scottish prosecution service. These investigations are ongoing by Police Scotland, and they are being taken extremely seriously. So Lockerbie, from that point of view, is not dead. And then, of course, there is the petition for an independent inquiry into the Lockerbie affair, which is before the Scottish Parliament. Now, the Scottish government, you know, has always refused to convene an inquiry, saying that, you know, there are international implications. It needs, and under the devolution settlement, you know, it needs a government with international powers, like the United Kingdom government, to convene such an inquiry. Now, in fact, I think that is, if you like, a get out. Because I mean, what we are asking, what the petition is asking for, is for the Scottish aspects of the Lockerbie affair, the Scottish police investigation, the Scottish prosecution, the Scottish trial. That is what the petition is asking the Scottish government to set up an inquiry into. And these are all 100% internal Scottish matters. So saying, you know, that, well, we don't have, you know, foreign affairs responsibility under the devolution settlement is a bit of a cop-out.
And I think it'd be fair to say the principal function of a government, whether that's the Scottish government or UK government or whatever, it's a government. And that is to maintain the integrity of the justice system.
Yes, that's right. I mean,
and so
absolutely. That is, you know, the primary function, it seems to me, you know, of a government, and particularly, I may say, you know, under the current devolution settlement. This is the most important function that the Scottish government has. It seems to me it doesn't have responsibility for foreign affairs, regrettably, in my view, doesn't have responsibility for defence, regrettably, in my view, doesn't really have responsibility, you know, for social welfare, for the welfare system. What it does have responsibility for are home affairs and justice. And it should be, I think, exercising such powers as it does have to show that it deserves more powers.
And indeed, and I think it might be also fair to say that if the Scottish government took the bull by the horns here and you know, saved the reputation of the Scottish justice system, then it would deprive the UK government of any excuse to not properly investigate the truth.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
And sorry, I've just got a wee quote here from Ian McKee, who was speaking at the at the Scottish Parliament in 2010, who said that the Crown Office and Justice Department are the problem, and we need to go further afield, and there's too much power in the hands of civil servants. And I think he was suggesting there that it's politicians, elected representatives, that really need to spearhead the investigation and to clear this matter up and bring,
Yeah, no, I
closure.
think that's right. And part of the problem is, that the criminal justice system, the Lord Advocate's Department, the prosecution system, really is in the hands of people who have grown up within that office.
Yeah.
And, this is a great change. It's one of the major changes in the Scottish criminal justice system, over the past 20 years. It used to be that the Lord Advocate and the Solicitor General in Scotland, were people from the practicing profession. When governments changed, there would be a new Lord Advocate who supported the governing party and a Solicitor General who supported the new governing party. What is happening now is that the Lord Advocate is being appointed from the ranks of the permanent civil servants in the Crown Office. So you're not getting, if you like, the direction, the overall policy direction that in the old days was given by the incoming Lord Advocate, who was not somebody who had been, in the office and was imbued with the ethos of the office. This was somebody who could cast a beady eye on the practices of the office. That isn't happening anymore because the top two appointments, the Lord Advocate and the Solicitor General, are promotions from within the office. So you can't expect to get, if you like, the outside, unbiased view that you got in the old days from Solicitor Generals and Lord Advocates. You don't get that anymore because, as I say, man and boy, girl and woman, they have grown up in the office.
Okay, I've got another question. As long as you're okay for time, I've got a question here from a viewer, Ludwig, who asks, do you have any comment about today's piece, cooperation between British spies and Gaddafi's Libya revealed in official papers? Now, I don't know whose piece that was. Do you know was this an article?
Gosh,
a blog piece?
I haven't myself, but
Okay.
Ludwig is someone I think who knows a great deal about Lockerbie. He wrote a 120 article series on Lockerbie, and so anything that he says I will take seriously. But and certainly it's long been rumored that Musa Kusa,
Yes.
who was, allegedly Gaddafi's spy chief, was also, a contact for British intelligence and indeed American intelligence. And that was why when he, escaped from Libya in the last days of the Gaddafi regime and came to Britain, he was, allowed to leave because, people had been saying, if Libya was involved in Lockerbie, then Musa Kusa must have been the man who ordered it, because he, if you like, was Gaddafi's dirty tricks chief. But he arrived in Britain and he was blithely allowed to leave. So that, to me, indicates that perhaps over the years there actually had been links between Musa Kusa and British intelligence.
Definitely. Ludwig again, do you have any comment about the suicide of Alberto Nisman the day before he was about to talk? So that's Alberto Nisman.
Yeah. Yes, this is, the investigating magistrate, that's right, who was, I think, about to spill the beans, or allegedly spill the beans about President Kirchner. The Iranian witness that had been providing him with information was Misbahi. Now, Misbahi is an Iranian who has actually said, that it was Iran which was responsible, which ordered
Yes.
the Lockerbie bombing in retaliation, for the shooting down of the Iran air flight by the USS Vincennes in the
Yeah.
Persian Gulf. And Misbahi, who was an official, a now a discredited official of the Iranian regime, always said Libya had nothing to do with this. This was an Iranian operation. Iran funded the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command to bring down the plane. But it's interesting, I hadn't known until Ludwig mentions it, that a Dr. Nisman, Judge Nisman's a source was actually Misbahi. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
And Ludwig has just pointed out as well, the articles were in The Guardian.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got another point here. Are there any suggestions that Abu Nidal was a US agent? Abu Nidal.
Gosh. Now, that you see, yes, there have been such suggestions, and gosh,
Can we just
I mean,
maybe clarify who Abu Nidal is, just for others people listening?
yes, I mean, he is another of the Palestinian organizations. This time, I mean, he's not the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. That is headed by Ahmed Jibril. But Nidal, I think it may have been the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Forget the general command bit. There are so many splinter groups that it's difficult always to work out who is who. But certainly Abu Nidal's name has been mentioned in connection with Lockerbie, and also it has been suggested that he certainly worked for Jordanian intelligence. And if he worked for Jordanian intelligence, then, American intelligence would certainly be there alongside him.
Yeah, and I'm just going to ask one last question, and then we can conclude. Do we know if there were any CIA agents on Pan Am 103, or I'm just trying to clarify whether that's knowledge or whether that's hearsay.
Gosh, I mean, there certainly were U.S. government officials on Pan Am 103, particularly a group who came onto Pan Am 103 via Cyprus. And this is the group that some people have suggested were going back to the United States to spill the beans about drug operations.
That's what I was getting at.
That is one of the, if you like, the conspiracy theories that surrounds Lockerbie, that Pan Am 103, was destroyed in order to prevent them getting back. As I say, there are so many conspiracy theories around Lockerbie.
I think that the problem with that one is that it relies an awful lot on assumption. I mean, I think it was a lot to do with the bags that were the suitcases that were being removed from the scene were to remove samples of drugs which were to be taken back, which were evidence of the drug ring. But I mean, that's not something we would want to spend too much time on if it's not a solid theory. Morag Kerr has been listening, so thanks for listening in, Morag, and she has mentioned that Robert, you have explained things very well, so that's fantastic. I've just got one question from one of our listeners, and he's asking whether or not the polygraph test should have been used in Camp Zeist? I mean, that would have been your responsibility to decide on that or not. It was not used in a Scottish court, so were you just being consistent, or is a polygraph test one of these? Is it too subjective? Is it open to
Yeah, I mean,
misinterpretation, etc.?
yes, I mean, I'm not convinced about polygraphs, I'm afraid, and certainly uh, they are not accepted, or the results of polygraph tests are not accepted, either, as indicating guilt, or, as indicating innocence in Scottish criminal procedure. Now, I know David Howard, you know. Is always keen that FBI polygraphs should be used to eliminate suspects, but as I say, certainly not realistic in Scottish procedure, even if it were accepted that polygraphs were reliable, and I don't think that is generally accepted.
Okay, well, I think we can conclude. So it's been a real pleasure to have you on to Independence Live. If you'd ever like to come back on, you're more than welcome. So, is there anything else that you'd like to add to tonight's discussion, Robert?
No, I mean, thank you very much for having me on. And I simply want to say that I've been very critical of institutions Scottish, but I want to give a bit of praise to a Scottish institution, well, to two Scottish institutions. The first of those is the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, which, as I say, investigated the conviction of McGrahi and found that there were 6 reasons why there might have been a miscarriage of justice. That was not an easy thing for the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission to do in a case, of such international political concern. So that was brave of the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, and I congratulate them and am grateful to them for it. And the other institution I would like just to give a word of praise to is the Justice Committee of the Scottish Parliament. The Justice Committee of the Scottish Parliament has kept the petition for an independent inquiry into the Lockerbie affair live. I think it is probably the longest running petition still extant before the Scottish Parliament. And I think the Scottish Justice Committee, under the convenership of Christine Graham, MSP, has kept this petition open when it would have been easy for the committee to say, well, the government has said it's not going to hold an inquiry. We have done everything we can. But they have kept this petition open in order that I think the committee can maintain a general supervisory watching brief over what's happening in Lockerbie affairs. The SSR, the current SCCRC application, the police investigation into the allegations of criminal misconduct. I think it helps that the Justice Committee of the Scottish Parliament is maintaining this general supervisory watching brief, and I am very grateful to them. And once again, I think that was a brave decision on their part. The easy thing for them to do would simply have been to close the petition. They haven't done that, and congratulations to them.
Okay, well done. And I think it's incumbent on us as citizens of Scotland who make the society, for us to take part in this ongoing dialogue and not let the matter rest until we get justice. No justice, no peace. So could you just remind viewers of the details of the Lockerbie blog?
Yes, it is. It's called The Lockerbie Case, and the URL is LockerbieCase, all one word, .blogspot.co.uk. LockerbieCase.blogspot.co.uk.
Okay, and basically that's a review of everything that critiques of articles that are being written, and any
That's
new
right.
information or comment that's coming in
Yes.
from anyone. Okay, so it just remains for me to thank you once again, Robert Black QC. Thanks very much for joining us and giving us your time. It's been very valuable.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very grateful to you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, that's why we're here. I'm going to thank all the people who listened in to us this evening. Thanks very much for the comments and the questions that you put in. You're as much a part of this as everybody else. So, Independence Live, signing off. Thanks very much, everyone. Stay tuned. Okay? Good night.